If you've just tuned in, you've missed the wonderful Max Gillies, but he's still with us. And we're joined now by a politician, and on his own admission, Max doesn't do a Jeff Kennett, but this man does a wonderful job on Jeff Kennett. The man himself, ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Kennett. The boys played It's My Party and I'll Cry If I Want To.
Yes, well, I've had a few parties.
The main party, of course, that we'd like to talk about is the Liberal Party, which here in Victoria, a couple of months ago, dumped you as long-serving leader, highly controversial leader of the Liberal Party here in Victoria. You find yourself in the same boat as John Howard. Are you happy about the situation now that you can look back on it?
Yes, very much so. I think I've been in that job for about 6.5 years. It was time for a change. The party made that decision, and I'm very relaxed.
What can you do in comparison to the very high profile that you had and the power that you had as leader? What can be done now from a backbench in politics?
I think there's a lot of things that can be done. You've still got your electorate work, of course, and that's very, very important. I mean, that's what a politician's all about, servicing the needs of the community, but also there's policy work, Bert, and developing strategy and keeping our political opponents honest. So there's a great deal still to be done. It's a different lifestyle, but to me that's a benefit. I mean, I'm now spending a lot more time with my family and a lot more time gardening, and I'm enjoying that very much.
What about the Liberal Party itself? It appears not to be able to retain or gain government anywhere in Victoria. And for someone like myself and Max, who was brought up with the belief, I suppose, that it was the Liberals' right to reign, we thought that Sir Robert Menzies was the king of Australia. What went wrong?
I think everything happens in cycles to some degree. I mean, the Labor Party have now enjoyed considerable success, and yet that started to change in New South Wales, where I think Nick Greiner's doing an excellent job. Obviously, we're going to have a federal election shortly, and you may see a change there. But I think it's all a matter of timing as much as anything else, and Labor has been in the right place at the right time, and they're enjoying a period in office, and that's part of the competitive processes. And I don't think we'll ever see again in Australia governments of any political persuasion necessarily being in office for 27 years, whether it be in Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland or federally, and I think that's probably in the public interest.
You made a comment there that you said that we may see a change federally. You're not confident about the Liberals' chances?
I am very confident, but I wouldn't want to be political unless you give me the opportunity to be so. I think there will be a change. I think people are hurting in terms of interest rates very much indeed. I think the pilot strike has been terribly mishandled. And I think we're coming, the pendulum has swung, and I think it's starting to swing back again. I'm very confident that Andrew will be leading the country.
Well, he's a good friend of yours. You're very close, quite often on the phone to each other.
Not as often as we used to be, no.
And certainly not in car phones on a Sunday.
No, I don't have a car phone now. In fact, I was rung up at my advertising agency the other day by one of these promoters, salesmen for car telephones, and my wife now works at the advertising agency as well, and she took the call. And the salesman had great difficulty in trying to convince Felicity that I needed a car phone. So,
I can imagine.
No, we're finished with that little exercise.
Do you regret that moment in time when all of a sudden it was picked up, the conversation, and you were talking about John Howard in less than flattering terms?
Well, I mean, I think it's silly to regret what's happened in the past. I think you've just got to live with your life. I suppose, all of us from time to time in periods of great frustration say things which we wouldn't say under less frustrated circumstances. I suppose the only thing that interested me was that people were able to take a private phone conversation and publicly display it right throughout Australia and right around the world. It got coverage.
But did you almost die inside when you knew that it was going public?
Well, I got a call on Sunday night. It was after a by-election on Saturday night, and I was driving home. I made a phone call to Andrew, and it was Sunday night that the Sun journalist rang up and said, "Did you make a phone call to Mr Peacock last night?" And I said, "Oh, look, I can't remember." And he said, "Well, we've got a tape here of the conversation." And that was quite an incredible feeling to realise that they had it, and we had a discussion, and it was quite clear they were going to run it. But that's life. I mean,
what did you actually say about John Howard?
I don't think I'd repeat it here, and probably I wouldn't repeat it again because, as I said at the time, it was under very different circumstances, and we all have periods of frustration, and I don't think my conversations are necessarily any more different from yours or Max's at a period when you are upset and you express yourself quite, how would I say, colourfully.
Mr Hawke, do you have a car telephone at all?
Well, Bert, if I did indeed have a car phone, I wouldn't be about to broadcast the fact here on your television show. I think there are some things that, in this case, I agree with Jeffrey. Jeff, that this shouldn't have happened. Shouldn't happen to a dog. And
it didn't, and that was the trouble. In fact, it was interesting. As you know, they ran that story, and it got good coverage, and didn't help Andrew very much at the time, I'm afraid. But
that's an understatement, Jeff.
Very shortly after that, two well-known Labor politicians were involved in a telephone conversation, and the government, the federal government, changed the rules at 12 o'clock that night to prohibit that conversation being treated in the same way that mine and Andrew's was.
So the two Labor people, who were they?
I think it was Richardson, Senator Richardson, and it might have been Paul Keating. I'm not quite sure. Now having a discussion about Mr Hawke.
One imagines that Paul Keating would have quite some colourful telephone conversations.
I can't imagine Paul being a colourful sort of person, can you?
Jeff, do you have any ambitions to do federal politics?
No, Bert. I don't like flying, and right at the moment...
Well, you wouldn't have to worry about that at the moment, would you?
No, you'd be going back to the old days where people were travelling by train. No, I enjoy state politics. I love living in Melbourne, and ultimately the biggest factor is it takes you even further away from your family. And I've got 4 young children, and they've had to make some very big sacrifices over the last 13 years that I've been in politics. I have no intention of going federally at all.
OK, Jeff, if you were, hypothetically, in federal politics, what would you do now about this plain situation?
I first of all wouldn't give compensation. I would certainly insist that if I was the Prime Minister, I would say to Australian Airlines, which are owned by us, the public, that they have a responsibility to fly. I mean, it amazes me in this day and age where mankind can send satellites over 12 years to Neptune that we can't get supposedly mature men sitting down to resolve this dispute. And we have a situation where the Prime Minister and the airlines are on one side, the pilots are on the other, and ultimately it's the poor community that suffers. And I think the Prime Minister should instruct James Strong to sit down with the pilots. It's in our public interest. Our reputation as a trader is being destroyed. The tourism industry is being totally pulled apart, and I just cannot accept in 1989 that mature men can't sit down and resolve this dispute.
Do you know, I think everybody would agree with you, Jeff.
I really believe.
Can I just ask you, finally, one thing, and Max might like to enter in here because it intrigues me. I think you'd find that most people who know you and Bob Hawke personally would say that Bob Hawke is no nicer bloke than you. I mean, you're both nice people to meet.
I wouldn't agree with that.
No, but I mean, socially, you're pleasant to meet and you're good to meet, and you're certainly very sincere in what you believe in politically, although you may be poles apart. Why is it that you suffered so much bad press, and why is it seems that Bob Hawke gets a dream run in the media?
I think the big difference between Hawke and myself was more a matter of timing. Hawke was always a very outspoken person. I suppose I am as well. Hawke was in the lucky position that he got into Parliament briefly, was elected to the leadership on the day the election was called, and was immediately put into the role of Prime Minister. And that office carries carries with it a lot of respect, a lot of authority. I, on the other hand...
But Malcolm Fraser got a pretty hard deal, didn't he?
Oh, yes, but again, under very different circumstances, given the dismissal. I came in to lead the party after we'd suffered a major defeat and then had to endure a long period in opposition. And I think it's very hard in opposition. I was just saying to Max earlier, and I was speaking to my ex-counterpart, the Premier, yesterday about it. In opposition, it doesn't matter what you're on about. You can't actually put it into action, put it into place. And so to some degree it's frustrating. And in many cases it's easier for the media to attack an organisation or an individual who is A, outspoken, and secondly, can't convert policy into practice. So,
yeah, I would have thought it was just the opposite though, Jeff. I would have thought that in opposition you make the promises and you don't have to fulfil them unless you get elected.
Well, I'd like to think that we all made promises that were soundly based that could be put into place. I mean, it comes back again to characters, personalities. I've often been referred to as a larrikin, so was Bob Hawke. I think the big difference was that Bob got into office very quickly as Prime Minister, and I had to endure a long period in opposition.
Right. Well, obviously, Joe Arpiato plays a Labor supporter. I'll have to take a break here. Jeff Kennett, ladies and gentlemen, please thank him. We're back with you after this break.
Do 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 do.